Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing another Lightroom color grading tutorial. Sorry if you didn't hear me over that clap. I have done a video like this before, but I wanted to update it. I've had loads of messages about it, loads of questions. So I thought I'd redo the video, update it, and kind of go through it a little bit more leisurely. Hey guys, so this is just me editing, just kind of letting you know a quick announcement. As we mentioned in the last two videos, our Lightroom course is now out. So if you want to go ahead and check that out, the link is in the description. And the first 10 people to buy the course will get £50 off. So go ahead, check it out now. That link will be down below in the description. You can basically get, I think it's 31 lessons over 4 hours of content. You get our Lightroom Essentials pack for free in there, and you also get access to our closed private Facebook group. Let us know what you think, send in your thoughts. Without any further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so if you don't know who this Instagrammer is, Dylan FURSTY, or FURSTY on Instagram, basically does the ultimate Moody color grades on Instagram. If you just look at his page, what the hell? This is just like the ultimate Moody color grades. If you look at his edits, they're very dark, very, very low highlights, lots and lots of blues, lots of greens, and specifically a lot of fade, which is the key to this edit. But yeah, we're going to go through and we're going to be editing this photo here today on Lightroom. I'm going to take you through from the very beginning to the end how you edit like this. If you are interested, there is a Moody Lightroom There is a Moody Lightroom preset pack on the website down below. I will leave that link in there as well. Go ahead, check that out if you are interested. But without any further ado, buy some merch and let's start the video. First thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the basic panel. Now, best thing to do with the basic panel for his style is we're just going to drop those highlights. We want to preserve as much of this image as we can, so drop the highlights completely. And we're just going to get the shadows, lift those up a little bit just so we can kind of save some data there. We can kind of see more of what's going on. I'm going to get the temperature slider and I'm going to make this image slightly more blue just to start off with. But we are going to come back and we're going to tweak these a little bit more as the edit goes on, because you'll see what happens to the edit is it kind of really does begin to change. Right, so the next thing we're going to do, if you look at his photos, he does have quite a bit of contrast. Specifically with the whites and blacks, you can see there's the very bright whites, very dark blacks, but the whites aren't overexposed. So the key to doing that is dropping the highlights. In this case, I've just dropped them to -100. You may find if you do that, you'll actually just get like weird sort of greyed out, sort of smeared areas of the sky where there just is no data and it's just made white grey. That's a bit weird. Don't do that. Kind of save as much of the highlights as you can without it looking weird is what I'm trying to say. Shadows I've lifted up quite a bit because this image was quite dark to start off with, so just sort of balance that out. Next thing we're going to do is get the whites. We're just going to make those a little bit more harsh, just kind of +20 will do. And the blacks, we're going to really drop those blacks quite a bit, crush them all down to about -50, somewhere like that. And again, we can always come back and mess around with this a bit more. Next thing, vibrance, we're just going to drop the vibrance and we're going to drop the saturation a bit. I tend to drop the vibrance a bit more than the saturation. Again, it's personal preference. Vibrance and saturation seem to do very similar things. So if you're just a beginner, doesn't really matter, just sort of slide them both down a bit. In this case, I've dropped the vibrance a little bit more just because I like the look of it. No other reason than that. Clarity, I'm going to drop the clarity just a bit as well, because I'm going to come back up to the contrast here and I'm just going to shove in a little bit more contrast. You'll see if I add more clarity now, the image looks a bit weird. It kind of gives it this weird shiny look, which we don't want, so we're going to get rid of that. And his images are, in fact, actually quite soft if you look at them. So not much clarity in there at all. In fact, if anything, you could probably take off a little bit more clarity. Probably down to about -20. No more than that, you're pushing your luck if you go a bit further. Okay, we're going to leave the tone curve till the end because there's a little secret in there, and I want you to watch the whole video, so you're going to watch that at the end, or you can skip to the end and spoil it for you. So we're going to move on to the Hsl Slider now. The Hsl Slider, for those of you who don't know, is basically allows you to change the colour of each specific colour, if that makes sense. So you can make blue sort of more green and more purple. Saturation is just the amount of colour, the saturation of each colour, and the luminance is just the brightness of each colour, like the sort of exposure of each colour. So we're going to start off with the hues. Now, it's hard to see with his photos, but this one's a good example actually. Greens are this very sort of vibrant green. It's not a particularly realistic green that you see in nature very often, but it's a very vibrant green, and I'm going to show you how you can get that green now. First of all, we're going to leave the hues with the reds and the oranges and the yellows really, because there's not really much in this image. In fact, with the yellows, you want to drag the yellows up, because this is where we're working on the greens actually. So drag the yellows up to about +7, and you can see what effect that has on the greens. So if I just turn it off before and after, you can see the difference there. If you are wondering, before and after, just press the / key and it just shows you before and after. Greens, we're going to get the slider, and you can see if I drag it to the left, it kind of makes it more orange, sort of brown really. If I drag it to the right, it kind of gives you this cool looking green. This green you don't really see very often. It's kind of like a sort of bracken moss kind of green. That's the green we're going for. So you're going to drag it up completely in the greens, and if you see, if I just put the yellows back to one side, it kind of goes more brown on the left, more green on the right, and then it depends how much of that you want to put in. But that's kind of like one of the keys with the Moody color grades. You want to have those sort of green, specific greens, and also specific blues. Let's get back onto his images and have a look at his blues. Okay, so what I tend to notice, that's a cool funky image, is his blues are kind of teal. So sort of like a turquoisey, greeny blue. And the way we achieve that is we come to the blue slider, and you can do two things. You can just drag the blues down, you can drag the aquas down, and you have this weird tangy bluey mess. So we're not going to do that. But that tends to be what people do a lot of the time when they overdo it on their aquas, overdo it on creating that sort of teal look. Today we're going to get the aqua slider, and we're going to drag up the aqua slider to about +50, and then we're going to get the blue slider and we're going to drag that down to about -30. Not too much, but you can see if I just turn off the Hsl slider, it kind of does make those blues a little bit more teal. We can always come back and just mess around with these later on. Okay, now onto the saturation. His images have three, well, colours. Colour-wise, they've got two main colours really. That is green and that is blue, or sort of like green and teal. Occasionally, very rarely, you'll see other colours come in, like obviously if he's got a fox or a dog in there, he's not going to make them black and white. But the majority of the time you've got greens, you've got blues here, whites and blacks obviously. So we're going to be doing that today by coming onto the saturation slider, and we're going to get the reds, and we're just simply going to drop the reds, drop the oranges, come to the purples and magentas and drop those as well. So we've desaturated all the colours we don't want, not to -100, but basically -100. So there is like, it's not just like completely black and white. Obviously, if you've got people in your image, don't do that, because you're going to get them like have really like weird skin tones. If you've got people in your image, I suggest dropping it to about -30, -40. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to come onto the yellows and the greens. His photos don't have vibrant greens in his image, although he does, actually sometimes he does, depends like here on the ferns, but that's more in the Luminance Slider. It still is quite desaturated. Sometimes, like on this kingfisher for example, it is vibrant. So you can kind of take your look on really. For this example, we're going to be going more desaturated, because there's no specific like outstanding green colour. The whole image is quite green, so we don't want it to be overly green. So we're going to get the yellows, and we're going to just drag the desaturation down a bit. Not too much, about -30 will do. Get the greens, and I'm just going to mess around. If I increase the greens actually to about +60 and drop the yellows more, you can kind of get a nice balance between desaturated greens and also have enough sort of yellowy greens in there. Sorry, the other way around. Desaturated yellows and enough greens in there that it doesn't look weird. You can also just go for like both desaturated or desaturated greens and more saturated yellows. Matter of personal preference, but really you don't want to have them both saturated. You want to have one desaturated, one more saturated, or them both desaturated. So just mess around with your image and see what you're looking for. As for the blues, in this image I'm going to get the aqua slider, and I'm just going to boost the aquas. And in the blues, I think what I'm going to do is, actually I think I'm going to boost the blues as well, up to about +50. No more than that. I'm going to keep that where it is, and we can always come back, and if it's too much, take it away. Also, I'm finding it hard to see the colours because of this massive lamp in my eyes to kind of light this image. Okay, so we're now onto the Luminance Slider. To do the Luminance Slider, again, we're just going to be working on the colours in the image that we really need. So that's going to be the yellows, greens, aquas and blues. Everything else kind of just leave alone. If there are skin tones, again, maybe sort of increase the oranges ever so slightly and decrease the reds, just to kind of add a little bit of like contouring on the skin. But other than that, leave the reds and oranges alone. Okay, so for the yellows, I'm just going to brighten up either the yellows or the greens. In this case, I think I'm just going to brighten up the greens and maybe darken the yellows a bit, just to kind of give a bit more contrast in those greens. And for the blues and aquas, I'm going to drop the aquas and drop the blues actually, and increase the aquas, just to kind of brighten up those highlights and really make those sort of clouds a bit darker. So like that. Not too much, because you see if I drop it completely, I get this like weird look next to the mountains where it doesn't look fully blended in. So we're just going to drop those about -50 in the blues and increase the aquas about +70. That's it for split toning. That's it for the HSL. We're going to leave that there, and now we're going to work on split toning. Split toning is basically just adding a certain amount of color to an image. So for example, in this case, we're going to be choosing we're going to be choosing blues and greens, and we're going to be adding those to the highlights and shadows, and we're going to be adjusting the amount of saturation in each. So you'll see what I mean when I show you now. If you press Option or Alt on your keyboard and you drag the slider along, you can see different colors you're going to add. I'm going to go for a sort of 187, somewhere like that, 200 mark for the highlights. Drag up the saturation probably to about 11%. Nothing too high, just enough that if I turn it off and on again, it makes the image slightly bluer. And then for the shadows, same again, Option or Alt. This one I'm going to kind of go for slightly more green colour. Yeah, okay, so I'm just going to kind of add in some more blues again, so about 12%, and we've gone for 196. And all you'll see here is we're kind of beginning to get that sort of undertone colour that FURSTY has here, this sort of colour here. Our image isn't looking anything like his yet. That's because we have left out the most important step, which is the tone curve, which I told you should wait for, and here we are, we've got to it. Tone curve, we're going to start off with a nice simple S curve, and that's just going to introduce some more contrast into the image. You can see how contrasted that's making the image. If I just do the before, this is what it looked like unedited, and this is it now. Finally, we're going to get the bottom side of it, and we're just going to drag it up, and that's just going to increase the amount of fade in the image. So you can see the blacks are kind of made that sort of grey colour, and that happens by dragging up that side of there. Then I'm just going to come in, tweak around a bit more. I think it's too contrasty. Move it around a bit, and then I'm going to get the whites, and I'm going to drop those down as well, and that adds some fade into the whites as well. So we're kind of almost there. What you will be noticing though is it is a little bit oversaturated. It isn't quite the same look as his. So what we're going to do is come back, and we're going to drop the vibrance some more, the saturation some more, and we're just going to literally play around with these until we get the look we're looking for. Maybe a bit more vibrance, and we're kind of getting there. I might make the image slightly darker, in fact, come in, make the shadow slightly bright. And I think we are more or less there. If I do the before and the after, we are getting that sort of look that he gets here. I mean, these are all, it's kind of hard to tell with these ones. This is a good example. This is a good example here, really, where you've got something going on in the sky. These ones here, where you've kind of got some other colours, some lighter colours in the sky. You've got those looks going on there. One thing you can do is actually come back into the HSL, and we might want to make the thing even darker. You could just say, well, I want to just drop my greens, make them really dark, sort of make everything just really, really dark. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it as is for the time being, because I'm kind of liking the look this is doing. One thing that is probably worth doing on this image, for example, is I think there's too much going on in the foreground that's not really worth looking at. What's cool in this image is you've got this sort of nice texture here to the beach, to the mountain, and then the sky. So I'm going to crop it off by coming into this tool here. And you've got like a lot going on in the sky. Like you've got this very moody, overcast sky. So I don't want to lose that. So I'm just going to come in. Actually, I'm going to come onto here, select 4x5 because that's the size for Instagram. And then I'm literally going to just crop in the image to where I like. And I think probably somewhere like that is quite nice. Press OK, and there we have it. I think we're done. I don't think there's much more we can do with this image, but I think we've really got that kind of look we were going for. You can always come up and you can make it sort of more blue if you wanted to, mess around with those colours, but that's how you do that Moody colour grade. The key thing to take from it is the tone curve. Spend your time on the tone curve, but really mess around with introducing that fade in the shadows there. And if you drag it out a bit more, you can kind of add a bit more fade, and you know, you can play around quite a bit, and maybe you kind of make a bit more contrasty fade by adding another point there. So you can see you can spend a lot more time on the tone curve than I have done in this video. It's a fairly quick tutorial. I didn't want to do it in too much detail, but I wanted to kind of explain to you about why you do certain things. So I hope this was useful. Like I said at the beginning, Lightroom course is coming out soon, and you'll learn why you do these certain things. You'll learn how you can look at someone's image and you can work out how to edit like them. So you don't need to come back to this YouTube all the time and look at my ugly mug, although please do like and subscribe if you did enjoy this video. I will see you in the next one. Go check out We Do Have Merch. I'll see you in the next video. Live long and prosper.